All right, so my name is Jesse, and I am the lead for the Conservation Stories Canada project, where over the next year, I'll be featuring stories coast to coast across Canada of amazing people working tirelessly to protect wild species and wild habitats. And today, I'm joined by Dr. Emily Choy, who basically is the embodiment of everything that I'm trying to convey in this project. Her work takes her to some of the most remote and amazing regions of Canada to understand and help conserve some really, really fantastic creatures. So, Emily, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me, Jesse.
Yeah. So I know that your work is taking you up to Nunavut, and I want to start by setting the stage of what it's like to actually get up to your field site, like where you begin, how you actually get there, what that process looks like.
Well, that's a great question. So my work is I'm currently working on thick Billed Murres on Coates Island in Nunavut. And so it's basically a small island. It's close to Southampton Island in northern Hudson Bay. And so basically, in order to get there, I basically fly from Ottawa to Nunavut, and then I basically take a twin otter and land on the beach of on Coates Island. And from there, so where I'm located, I'm studying thick-billed murres, and there's a colony of about 30,000 breeding pairs on the cliffs of Coates Island. And the interesting thing is our cabin, so the research station, is actually at the top of the cliffs. So it's basically the cliffs are sharp on one side near the ocean, but off the beach, it's actually it's a fairly decent, like it's you can basically climb up it. It's not too steep, so there's basically paths to go up it. Yeah. So on the day that we arrive, we'll basically go, bring up all of our gear and go up to our cabins. But of course, as scientists, and we usually spend, last time I was there, we spent 2 months in the field. Wow. We have a lot of gear, so we actually have to use a pulley system in order to bring up all of our equipment to the top of the cliffs. Yeah. Where our cabins are. But it's quite amazing because once you're up there, you can basically walk right out like like about 10 meters, and you can actually see the seabirds and they're basically their roosts and the cliffside. So it's quite amazing.
It sounds amazing. By the way, I love this idea of like, oh, there's trails, you can get up there. And I think that your definition of an easy trail to get up is probably a little bit different than the average person's, but this is very cool. So the birds are on the cliffs, and I've seen this video of you talking with the birds beside you, and this looks like quite the hardcore place to get to. So are you rock climbing? Are you anchored into the cliff? Like, how are you getting to the actual birds to do the study?
No, that's a great question. So before I even started my field season, I actually had to take a rock climbing training course, because we do, in order to monitor the birds. So we do many activities. We do egg counts, we dam the birds, we measure chicks, and as well as our kind of deployment studies. Wow. But in order to do so, yes, we are fully equipped with rock climbing gear. We have a harness, there's ropes that are set up. So there's a rope course. And so each of us, we're basically on a team of up to around 6 people, and we each have our location on the cliffs where we do our plot checks. But in order to do that, yes, we have to be strapped in. We have to know how to do all the kind of the rope knots and make sure that we're secure, because we often have to descend onto our areas on the cliffs.
Yeah. And so already we're on this remote island. You've taken this tiny plane out from already a very remote community in Nunavut to get here. You've climbed up this cliff. There's a cabin, and you're rappelling down the cliff to get the birds. This is already quite the picture of sort of science in action. But what's it like? For the Arctic, people get a very set sense in their mind of what that's like. Perpetual darkness, and it's always cold, and everything's cake nice. But you're going up in the summer where it's quite different. And if you could explain a little bit about what that looks like to you when you're actually there for those couple months, that would be lovely.
Yeah, so we arrived in 2019. We arrived around mid-May, and we stay until the mer chicks have fledged. So that's usually the second week of August. And when we arrive, it's basically like spring here. So there's still some snow. There's ice. You can definitely see the sea ice, but the weather tends to be, it's a bit, it kind of hovers around, +5 to -1. So that's around May. But in July, so in the summer when the birds are chick rearing, the temperatures is around it's around about 10 to about 18 degrees. So the warmest it was in 2019 was about 18, 19 degrees.
Wow.
And yes, it's absolutely beautiful. So like during the summer, there's there's lots of there's lots of walrus. So there's also a big walrus haul-out. So a lot of animals are using the areas around Coates Island. Lots of Arctic foxes that actually will run and basically feed off of or basically steal seabird eggs and chicks. And then we also have to be wary of, like, once the sea ice disappears, then we get polar bears. In 2019, we didn't see many. We saw like one or two that were far away, but there are times where they actually are on the cliffs eating the birds and eggs.
That's got to be kind of distressing. I mean, you're going down every day. I mean, not just fear for yourself, but sort of like, oh, my study animals. I'm so fascinated, and there they are being taken away by this fox or bear. So this is quite the incredible dedication to get to these things. And I'm curious whether the Murres are something that you heard about a research project and just wanted to be involved, or this is something that you spearheaded. And what's the allure of the birds? Like, why are they so cool to you? Why are they so fascinating?
That's a great question. So Murres are basically like the penguins of the Arctic. And, as a kid, I'd heard so much about penguins, but I'd never heard anything about the Murre, which is quite a shame because, I originally was fascinated by Murres because, I had finished my PhD on beluga whales in the Beaufort Sea, and they're prolific divers. They can dive up to over 1,000 meters. And Murres are also exceptional divers, so they can dive up to or over 200 meters in a matter of minutes.
Wow.
But what's really amazing about them is that they also spend a lot of time flying. And in birds, flying and diving are an energetic trade-off. And the perfect example of this is the penguin, who is an amazing diver but has lost its ability to fly over time. But Murres do both. But they have to expend really high amounts of energy in order to fly. So they're not very good flyers, but they migrate. They spend 4 hours a day foraging. And so they just have these amazing energetic demands, but are basically, so they're quite an exceptional seabird.
Yeah. I know they never will have the opportunity to meet, but I can picture penguins looking longingly up at the Murres going, man, we could have stuck with that if only we tried. Have you ever seen penguins in the wild? Have you ever been down to Antarctica or any of the areas they exist or not?
Unfortunately not.
Okay, but you'd like to, just to see for contrast at some point, or I don't know.
Yeah, no, I would love to. Yeah, just to see how they differ from the Murres and definitely.
So with the energy allotment, I know that some of your work has touched upon climate change being a big impactor of them in the present and in the future. And so with some of the other interviews I've done, there are much easier fixes to save a species. It's something where, if turtles are being hit crossing a road, you can build a culvert that they can cross through. Climate change is obviously this bigger systemic issue. And so is your goal as a scientist to tell this story, to showcase this and hope that it leads to action, or take a more direct role in pushing people to actually conserve what to you is obviously such a really incredible animal? I mean, this is I guess a dark question, but what's the future of the Murres, and is this something where we can do some positive good to help protect them?
So that's a great question. So the Coates Island Murre population is currently stable. So it's currently a healthy population. The Murres in Canada are generally healthy, but there are a circumpolar bird. So there are populations in Europe, such as Iceland and Greenland, that have been declining, which is hypothesized to be due to climate change.
Yeah.
And the Murres in Canada at Coates Island have actually experienced a 30-year shift in diet. So with the warming of Hudson Bay, they've switched their diet or their prey from about 50% Arctic cod to 50% capelin, which has resulted in what is believed to have resulted in a decline in chick growth rate. So kind of like a lower decrease in energy consumption.
Yeah.
Other than that, I'm also working on the impacts of warming on the birds. So thick-billed Murres they're cold adapted birds, so they're only found in waters or foraging waters that are around in less than 8 degrees Celsius. And so what I've found, along with other Arctic birds, snow bunting, is that they're very poorly adapted to heat. And one of the reasons why this study came about was that around the late 90s, there were instances of Murres actually during warm weather days, or not really warm, like 22 degrees, dying on their nests due to heat stress. So because they spend really long incubation periods, so from around 12 to 24 hours, so they were actually overheating in full sun. So kind of the goal of our research is to look at factors affecting the Murres. So we know that shift in diet, heat is one that I'm finding is they're quite sensitive to. Hudson Bay is also there's also a lot of shipping activity going on, and we're finding that it overlaps with some of the Murre habitat.
Yeah.
And so, I guess, I mean, it's hard to know what the future of the Murre is because of all of these factors and how they play. But there's currently being work done by my group to identify high quality habitat areas that overlap with shipping.
Yeah.
And I recently worked on a report for a proposed protected area around the Southampton Island biological significant area. So that if that comes into policy, then that might help the Murres, or at least relieve them of some of the stressors they are facing.
I think this is a great thing. I mean, a lot of the species I've had the chance to cover, you get a lot of the species I've had the chance to cover are critically endangered. They're in dire straits already. We know why. So it's disheartening, but it's interesting to hear that even a species that is doing relatively well right now, there are a lot of threats that are coming down the pipeline that might impact it. Certainly shipping in the north and Arctic habitats in general face so many unique changes that are coming to them in the next few years from human impacts in a wide variety of ways. And so I'm glad your work touches upon that. I hope it leads to some protected areas to make sure that we can save such really incredible species. And that's very, very cool. Emily, I guess to wrap up, one question I really want to ask, and this is something that I think is integral to Arctic research in general, is that you've had the chance to work with Inuit communities in Nunavut and beyond. And so I want to just ask, what have you taken from that? So from that collaboration, what have you learned? What have you what's the impact to you personally that you've taken from these sort of connections and chats?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So yes, I did my PhD on Beaufort Sea beluga whales and was part of a community-based monitoring program in partnership with Inuvialuit communities in which beluga whales are traditional subsistence harvests. So I basically, during the summer lived with families or hunters and their families, and was able to collect a lot of my tissue samples from these hunts. And because of this amazing relationship, Fisheries and Oceans and like myself, we have a much better understanding of the factors affecting beluga whales. So I looked at impacts of climate change or environmental change on their diet, on body condition and physiology. And so one of my big findings was that there was a strong relationship between body condition and diving physiology. So the belugas that were in the best condition were also the best physiology for diving. But one of the eye openers was just seeing the impact of climate change on community members. Just speaking with elders at the camps, and for my first year there, I heard about warming temperatures, how it was warmer on Kendall Island than it had been in years. Yeah. Some of the findings that the scientists found were actually the community members had actually first warned us about some of our findings. So for instance, Lois Harwood published a paper about a decline in inferred growth rates, so body size and age in the whales. And the community members had been saying for a while, the belugas are getting smaller, So that was really interesting. And then just seeing the daily impacts or the impacts of climate change on the communities, such as like the cabins where I stayed. So people had cabins on these islands and then hunting camps. And because of there's an issue with receding coastlines and climate change, many of these cabins were actually falling into the water. So yeah, just seeing it was like really an eye-opening experience. Yeah, I mean, it was wonderful to work with the communities. I mean, I got to meet everyone, and after sampling a beluga whale, I would be invited in for tea and biscuits, and basically met every member of the family. But it was very eye-opening to see the impacts of climate change on northern communities.
What a unique and special experience. That is very, very cool. And I mean, I love that you started this with the idea that the knowledge that's been gained for people living in the community sort of inspired and pushed researchers to actually take action and study in a Western science way. I know a lot of the researchers we featured on this broadcast have talked about this two-eyed seeing approach to conservation, to science in general. And so that's a perfect embodiment of that. And you stress the fact that climate change isn't just something affecting animal populations, but certainly and more exacerbated in our northern communities, it's something that really affects people as well. And so doubly important to make sure that these are things that people take very seriously with regards to conservation, because it impacts a lot more than just wildlife. And so, yeah, Emily, this has been so great, and thank you so much for sitting down with me today. I really appreciate it.